Welcome to Potstirrer Podcast, Riverside Chats. I am your host, Jaye Pool, and I'm joined by my husband, Chuckles.
Hi.
Today's episode is different from a normal show.
Jay and I are like many couples who have differences of opinion on a number of political issues. Our conversations on politics and current events can get pretty intense at times.
So we want to bring just a little bit of that stimulating conversation to you, our listeners, through a show format we call Riverside Chats. It's named in part for President Franklin Roosevelt's Fireside Chats, where he would speak directly to the American people by radio. We want to bring a diversity of viewpoints to Potstirrer Podcast from where we are.
Down by the river.
This will be the first show using the Riverside Chats format, but we will bring it back on occasion as a way to stimulate thought and discussion. Especially in a political climate where both right and left retreat to their echo chambers, this is an opportunity to break out of that a little bit and understand and humanize different viewpoints. We also want to hear your feedback. My show is for you. What do you think of the issues we will discuss on this show or brought up in previous episodes? What would you like us to talk about in future episodes? Even if you don't want to wait for a new episode, go on the Potstirrer Podcast Twitter feed or Facebook page where you can interact with us and with other listeners.
So let's get started.
Potstirrer Podcast, where politics, religion, and history collide. And it's not always polite. So as you know, I typically talk a lot about healthcare in my episodes, like especially this Trump care issue. Right now what's going on is that the Senate is getting ready to pass Trump care. This week, Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell started the fast track process to push Trump care through the Senate. So they're bypassing the typical work that is done on a bill through committee using Senate Rule 14, and they're putting it on the calendar for a vote. The Republicans are also having closed-door sessions with their fellow Senate leaders to round up the 50 votes they need to pass the bill. Remember that if they can get to 50 votes, Vice President Mike Pence is the tiebreaker.
Nonetheless, though, I can't see any way at all that this is going to pass the Senate because it's just a terrible bill and it's going to get torn apart no matter what.
I wish I had your faith. Just because I've seen what happened in the House. The House went and passed it anyway. Now, granted, there were a number of Republicans that weren't on board for it, but there were still enough that ended up passing it. And so I just feel like they're not... I mean, it may be a little bit tougher, but at the same time, I just don't trust that there's going to be enough Republicans that have the guts to do the right thing.
The last time it only passed by 3 votes, and I mean, there's enough Republicans that are anti-Trump as it is, that I can't see it passing the Senate as it is currently.
Yeah, but I just feel like some of the Republicans that are against Trump, there is kind of softly against Trump. Like, I feel like when the rubber meets the road, they still are in line with their fellow Republicans. I feel like they're going to try to make it happen regardless to, number one, give themselves a win, and number two, to get a tax bill done. Because really, the AHCA is not really a healthcare bill as much as it is a tax bill.
I don't know how really softly you can call the anti-Trump Republicans. I mean, I can think of how they were even all through the election process, and I believe Paul Ryan was pretty strongly anti-Trump, and he's still not the most popular president, among other Republicans. So I still disagree with you as far as the healthcare just going through sight unseen.
Like, he wasn't too keen on Trump during the election, but he's been working with him on this healthcare bill. Like, this is his baby. It's more about them having kind of this unified front, especially for their donors. I guess I just don't have that same faith that they're going to really do the right thing. I mean, especially since they doubled down on what was already a terrible bill. They're willing to cut 23 million people's health care. I think that that's really problematic.
That is problematic, but I'd like to think that they're going to at least fix it up a little bit. Because, I mean, I know that we can both agree that Obamacare has been somewhat divisive. You know, there's a lot of support for it, but there's also a lot of people that have been hurt by it with the increased monthly payments and and the whole Obama lie of, if you like your doctor, you can keep your doctor. If you like your plan, you can keep your plan. And yeah, there's been numerous people that have been hurt by that. So I think that a change would be good, but it does have to be the right change.
I think a lot of the reason why Obamacare didn't work out the way that it was intended was because from the very beginning, the Republicans wanted to kill the plan. When they got back into power, there's a push to not fund it. Also, Republican-led states chose not to accept Medicaid expansion, which was a huge part of Obamacare. So it didn't cover as many people as was expected. There are issues that were in place because the Republicans made those to be issues. But the other thing is, too, with this plan is that this was really, to begin with, a compromise plan. Obamacare was really like the Republican plan from a decade prior. But I think it was more about wanting to see Obama fail than actually being against the plan in and of itself.
Let's be for real here. The big failure of Obamacare was on Obama's part, willing to bend over backwards just to get Republican approval.
And I can't totally disagree with that piece of it, in a sense that, I mean, the Republicans made it very clear that they weren't going to work with them. Like, Mitch McConnell from the very beginning was like, he wanted to make Obama a one-term president. He and the GOP weren't going to work with him on anything. And so because of that, it was misguided for Obama to try to compromise. I think the Democrats should really push a single-payer option, a full-on single-payer universal plan. People don't want to talk about this. The big issue is that we're privatizing healthcare, and when you privatize anything, the idea is that, okay, you're going to make a profit. And the idea of keeping people healthy and taking care of people when they're sick, that doesn't jive very well with the idea of making profit.
I mean, that's very true, and I can't disagree with a privatized kind of healthcare working, or at least being the best option. But I'm a little skeptical as to whether it could really work in this country. But I think that considering the last two things that are the last two plans that have been implemented, I think it could be worth trying.
Mm-hmm.
Just kind of like a Medicare for everyone kind of thing.
California is implementing a universal system, and they say that states are laboratories of democracy. So it'll be interesting to see how that works out in California. And I just think ultimately there has to be a real comprehensive change. And it's just that the idea of putting private companies in charge of healthcare is just profit, and people's health seem to be kind of in competition with each other. And I'm not seeing this being viable long term.
I mean, it's funny that you bring up California when in reality California is one of the biggest enemies to good healthcare anyway, considering the way that they let the illegal immigrants go into any hospital and get free healthcare, and you don't hear anything else about it.
Yeah, well, that's the thing, though. I mean, when you go to the hospital, it's not like they card you or try to figure out what your status is if you're sick.
I mean, of course not, but I mean, I think that there should be some sort of a system set up, where even an illegal will have to at least pay something. instead of getting, the U.S.'s healthcare, which, agree or not, is still really, really good hospital work, but the insurance part of it's not so good. So I mean, they're still getting the really, really good healthcare for free. I disagree with that completely.
Like, I just think that the whole system is being geared around profit is a big issue. And I mean, as far as like the illegal immigration thing, I don't think that the battleground for illegal immigration or figuring out what to do with undocumented workers or people that come across illegally, I don't think that the battleground for that is the hospital. Like, there's a time and place for that, but I don't think that when somebody is like, has come in sick or is, having an emergency, that's the time to figure out whether they belong here or not.
I mean, I'm not trying to start the whole debate over whether they belong here or not. I'm trying to start the debate that they shouldn't be getting this free healthcare sight unseen, just because they're undocumented, though.
Yeah, but I think that there's more to it than that. Like, I mean, there's still like that kind of big picture thing that we need to take care of. As far as like the free healthcare and hospitals go, I mean, even people who are here legally, and even citizens, if you can't like pay a hospital bill, then you can apply for indigent care. So, I mean, that's, it's not like it's just a thing of like, oh yeah, illegals get free healthcare. I mean, I think there's a little more to it than that. But nevertheless, I think that that's kind of the least of our concerns when there's a bigger issue.
Of course there's a bigger issue, but you can still look back to these illegals getting this free health care, as being a problem, because that's helping to drive up cost also, because who's going to pay for this health care for all these illegals that go to the emergency room for a non-emergency?
I mean, yeah, but like, I think that that's the whole thing about it, and that's why the system that we have is broken.
Well, of course it's broken.
Because it's all geared towards like, okay, well, because when you look at even the concept of insurance, right? The concept of insurance is that, like, for any kind of insurance, like whether it's auto, home, whatever, right? You're paying X amount of money to join a pool with other people and groups of people that have various types of risks. And then if something happens, then like if it's a valid claim, you can, pull your money out of the system. But it's going to cost everybody in the pool. So like that's just kind of the way it goes. And, when it comes to healthcare, you have people that are insured, but then you also have people that are uninsured, whether they are illegal immigrants or they are legally immigrants, or if they're American citizens. You still have people that are not covered, that like they go to hospital, they don't have to pay for whatever reason, and those that cover the cost is going to be the people who are insured, because it's going to be higher bills for everybody. But that's kind of the whole thing, and that's part of the reason why like this whole insurance thing, it just isn't. I don't think it's the proper option for healthcare.
I totally agree with you, but there just doesn't seem to be anybody that has any interest in actively fixing it, which I think is a whole nother can of worms that no one wants to open.
Mm-hmm. Well, and that's the thing. Like there's people that make money off of this. I mean, the politicians, and when I say politicians, I'm talking about generally like on both sides, are getting a lot of money from big money donors that have a stake in a lot of this stuff. A lot of these guys are investors in these healthcare companies. So it's not, I don't think the parties have clean hands on it. I think that's probably, in a sense, why you have like the GOP going with a crazy bill like the AHCA, and the Democrats not really wanting to go full force on a public option or on a true universal system.
So do you think that there's any politician that truly cares enough to pull or to push for a universal kind of system?
I'm not sure at this time, but I think that's why the American people, like, we really need to to take responsibility for our own votes, because like we deserve the government that we have.
Oh, truly, because everyone came out in full force and voted last November for Dumb and Dumber. So really, they were both kind of terrible choices, but I guess it was more a decision of the lesser of two evils more than anything else.
Yeah, but I think the lesser of two evils is still evil, and we're still, like, as long as we keep voting the same people in day in, day out, and we're not holding their feet to the fire and having, and really giving them real consequences for what they do. Like, we're going to get the same folks over and over again, and they have no reason to care about about actually making real change.
Of course not, because all they care about at the end of the day is getting reelected.
Mm-hmm.
Because they get elected into office, they spend maybe a year trying to do things, and then they spend the rest of their term working on getting reelected.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think you're getting to the point with gerrymandering and everything that I don't even think they're even spending that year doing anything. I think at this point they figure, like, no matter what they do, they're going to still get elected anyway, because they've gamed the system so much that they don't even have to do real campaigning anymore. Like, they figure, like, okay, they have a safe district where, like, most of the vast majority of their constituents are going to reliably vote for anybody that has the right letter next to their name.
I think that Hillary Clinton proved quite well that a lot of campaigning is probably a good idea. Shots fired.
Oh boy, let's get it. Let's actually get into that. So that's one of the things that, like, a lot of people within, like, a lot of, like, the Democratic rank and file, Democratic leaders have been fighting a lot over, is, like, why did Hillary Clinton lose, and what does that loss mean for the party? Like, when Eric Trump was mentioning earlier in the week that that Democrats and people who are critics of his father are not even people, he also said something that, like, I kind of have to agree with him on, which is that the Democrats don't have a message right now.
Well, at this point, I think that that Eric Trump has definitely taken a page from his father and just uses Twitter for his own as his own personal playground of trolling.
The Democrats can't seem to decide what the message is going to be.
I find it funny myself that there was a list that came out, I believe, last week, showing everything that Hillary Clinton has blamed for her loss in the election. I believe it was a list of about 40 things, and not a single one of them was herself, or her lack of campaigning, or her lack of being worthwhile.
That's the thing about, with Hillary Clinton. I kind of think, like, it would be best for the Democrats if she just kind of went away quietly. Because, especially since she is unwilling to take any responsibility for her part in losing the election. Now, I mean, did the Russians run interference? I think a case can be made for that. Also, like, gerrymandering and voter suppression, I think cases can be made for those as well to some degree. Although I think gerrymandering is, like, has a lot less to do with her campaign, because that has to do more with Congress than with the presidential race. Are those actual issues? Sure. But Hillary being arrogant, Hillary not taking Trump seriously, or not taking the election seriously, really.
It's hard for her to take it seriously when she considered herself inevitable.
Yeah, and that's the thing. That's her arrogance. She figured that she was just going to go and she was going to win the election that she was going to win it running away, that she was going to take all those Obama votes, and she was going to take even more than that. But then she wasn't even paying attention to the fact that a lot of those Midwestern states, even those like Michigan, that are generally Democratic states in terms of presidential elections, they tend to go blue most of the time. Like, when it was getting close to the election, those states were within the margin of error. That should have given her some kind of sense that this could be a problem. And instead of that, like, she was, like, instead of campaigning in places like Michigan and Wisconsin, you know, so on and so forth, she focused on, like, Arizona and Texas. Those states weren't going to vote for her anyway. But she thought that she was so inevitable that she was going to try to make inroads in places that weren't generally like Democratic friendly, because she figured that she had her blue wall on lock. And that was just her arrogance. And she still, to this day, won't take responsibility for that, and it's ridiculous.
The way that I see it, Hillary Clinton needed the super predators to Pokemon go to the polls, but they Pokemon didn't.
Yep, I'll say. And I mean, and that's the thing too. Like, and I think that also touches on the fact that she was very much like, I don't think that she took her critics within the Democratic Party and among liberals seriously. Like, she was quick to belittle those that were questioning her on the left. And I mean, if you look at her at videos of like the way she was talking to those that brought up like her super predators comment in the 90s, or Black Lives Matter, or like different groups of people that had come to her with criticism of like some of her more conservative policies or some of her more conservative stances. Like, that was like, it showed that like she kind of had this air of like, oh, you see what I'm doing for you, as if like she was doing them a favor. And that was like, and I think that that's the worst way to come across to people that, you know, that can vote for you.
And let's also not forget the whole terrible CP time joke, or her being asked if she was pandering and her asking if it was working, or any of the numerous other slip-ups that she's had over the years in being a politician, or, you know, just even being the first lady or anything else.
I don't know if they're necessarily slip-ups. I just think that it's one of those things where like she wants to give lip service to certain groups within the base without actually taking their concerns seriously and actually having to do anything for them.
Because I don't recall on this last campaign trail, I don't recall her saying anything about any sort of ideas that she had, any sort of plans that she had, other than creating a no-fly zone over Syria, which would have made World War III almost inevitable upon her being elected.
I don't know about that. I don't know if it would have done that, but I think that. But yeah, I mean, I don't think that she articulated like actual plans. And I think that that's kind of the issue with the whole kind of Clinton legacy, the whole third way, is that it's very much like kind of this GOP light. This like very much like, okay, we're going to pay lip service. We're going to pay lip service to more liberal wings of the party, but what we're going to actually do, we're going to actually do more conservative actions. Like, so we're going to actually cozy up to Wall Street. We're going to actually ratchet up war. We're going to actually pass mandatory minimums. We're going to actually do these things that are actually like, hurting all these groups of people, and just are really more conservative principles than liberal principles. but it's in this whole like kind of friendlier guise than the Republicans. And I think at this point, the chickens are coming home to roost.
It's funny you mentioned the whole World War III thing and not being too sure about that, but keep in mind that Vladimir Putin came out and said that if Hillary Clinton was elected, that he was going to start nuking. So,
but I think that's a bad way to choose our leaders. To like, oh well, if Putin says, "Oh, I'm going to do X," that we shouldn't elect them. Like that's like it's our country. It's not Russia. We elect who we want. So, whatever.
Of course not. But there were hundreds of other perfectly good, viable reasons not to elect Hillary Clinton. So, I mean, there is that at least. But
well, I think that both candidates had major issues.
I mean, of course, but I think that Hillary Clinton's issues were a little more out in the open, and she was a little more. She was a little more outgoing with them. She was a little more flagrant with them.
I disagree with that. Like, I mean, Trump was very clear. Like, it was very clear that Trump had his issues, and he was very out there with as far as like kind of what he was trying to pander to, like especially with the whole like Mexicans are rapists and just and like just kind of like perpetuating these worldview of like these different groups that was essentially catering to stereotypes. And on top of that, like we're gonna build a wall, we're gonna do this, so on and so forth, right? Like there were some pretty jacked up things that were coming out of Trump's mouth.
I mean, of course there were, but you don't think that Hillary Clinton played up to stereotypes?
It's not that I think that Hillary Clinton's issues it was a different type of issue. Like, I think that it's like we talked about earlier, that, like, as far as, like, her base was concerned, that she was very much, like about, like, kind of paying lip service without actually doing anything. There's that issue, but then when you look at the other side of that, like, voting for Trump, pretty much he made it clear that those people were not who he was representing.
I mean, that's also very true, but I mean, I think that, again, like we both said numerous times, I think that it's a case of trying to decide who in your mind is your own version of the lesser of two evils, but at the end of the day, they were both still evil, they were both still bad candidates. Mm-hmm. Of course, there was never really any good candidate that was present. I mean, even Bernie Sanders had his own issues, so...
Well, I mean, I think that there were some decent candidates, but it was just like, but then decent as in not as bad as Trump or Hillary.
That's at the end of the day, that's not saying very much.
Right.
I mean, Jill Stein was crazy, and who's the other one?
Gary Johnson.
Gary Johnson was also crazy. They were all just a whole bag of nuts.
There was I mean, now for the Republican Party, I think probably out of that whole group of people, probably the best of that group was maybe John Kasich.
That was just the GOP in general was just a turnstile of crazy, though.
Right. I mean, that's the thing. Like they had like a huge batch of candidates, and I think that was part of what allowed Trump to win, was because the GOP itself, like the establishment, could never come up with like a candidate that everybody could really get behind. Because I mean, like the Democratic Party, they have their own factions. But like, kind of going back to the Democrats, what do you think their strategy should be going forward?
I think it's trying to find a candidate that everyone can agree on, that hasn't been a lifetime politician, that's not just a shill for Wall Street, that can't be bought off. You know, someone that has, decent values, that's clear with what they want to do, and doesn't seem as shady overall.
I think that they need that, but I think that they need a message first. I have gotten into a number of debates with people that disagree with me on this, and that's fine. But I just feel I really think that like what happened with Hillary Clinton shows that the third way, milquetoast, GOP light, that doesn't work. Like trying to be like the Republicans, but kind of kinder and gentler, that doesn't work. Like I think what really works is having a consistent progressive message, but having a consistent progressive message that is centered around something that most people can get behind, which is the economy, which is labor. Like I've mentioned in previous episodes about the idea that like the Democrats, before they became like the party of like, several different social issues, they were the party of labor. Now, I'm not saying that those social issues should go away. Like I'm not saying that they should necessarily like drop being, pro-choice on abortion, or that they should forget about civil rights or any of those types of things. But I think that the Democrats should have a comprehensive platform, but they should focus their message on labor. Like kind of get away from this whole Wall Street thing, cozying up to Wall Street, being about like kind of the big donors, the super delegates that pour in all this money, which I'm sure is great for the party, and for filling up the pockets of the politicians that are in the party. But as far as like really having a message that will get them back to relevancy, like I think like having that progressive message of like wanting things to be better for all of us and not just the 1%. I think that's really what they need to go after, and not just a message, but also the actions. Actually doing things. You go big, and then if you need to compromise a little bit later, okay, maybe so there, but you don't start with the compromise.
I think that if they just go and they find a candidate that's interested in bringing more jobs to the country, would be a really good start, because I think that's a big thing that's still struggling to this day, is the unemployment rate. I think ultimately, they any candidate for the 2020 election is going to want to have some sort of big scale plan to bring more jobs to the country for American workers, and I think that will get a boatload of support behind them. And I think that at that point, I think that you could see a huge landslide victory for the Democratic Party.
Mm-hmm. I think part of the issue too is not just like people getting jobs, but people getting jobs that they can live off of. Because there's so many people now. I mean, now like you go, like I remember back when I was growing up, and you could go, like when you're a teenager, you could go and you could work at McDonald's, you could work at your local retail store, or you can, that kind of thing. Like they had those types of jobs that were generally like for teenagers. But nowadays, people who are adults and elderly are in those jobs that they can't really live off of that. Like you can't pay your mortgage off of that, or really pay your bills off of that, or raise kids off of that. But those are the jobs that are out there, and I think there needs to be not just jobs, but well-paying jobs. That was part of the thing that was important when the Democrats were the party of labor. It wasn't just about having jobs. It was also about having well-paying jobs, and like jobs that you could support your family off of, and you could make enough money for like your kids to be taken care of, and then they would have a brighter future. Like it was more than just like, okay, having a job that paid like, $7.75 an hour or whatever the minimum wage is right now, and not really being able to live off of that.
Of course, I think that the whole minimum wage issue is a whole nother debate worth having also, as to what the minimum wage should be, because at the end of the day, these jobs that are the minimum wage jobs, they're more consider the starter jobs. That like you said you'd want to have as a teenager. To kind of get your feet wet. Kind of, get some work experience, get something for your resume, and then, as you're in high school, then in college, maybe even a slightly better job, maybe at the same place or somewhere else. Then obviously you go and you get out of college and you go get a job in whatever your degree is in. But nowadays that's no longer a reality, and that's tragic. There's the fact that you have people with much higher education degrees that are working these minimum wage jobs, and that's just wrong.
Yeah. And that's the thing, like, I agree with you, like, there's a number of people now that, because, back in the day, like, you didn't even have to go to college to have a good paying job. You graduate high school, and you could go into the factories, or you might go into the military and then go into some kind of industrial job, or whatever the case might be, or something more specialized if you learn something either in the military or even in college if you did go. But most people didn't go to college.
And nowadays, even a college degree from a prestigious school doesn't guarantee you any sort of a good paying job anyway.
There are people that I know that have advanced degrees that have bounced around in lower paying jobs. And it doesn't make any sense. Like, there are a lot of people that are saddled with student loan debt. And even if they get somewhat decent paying jobs, they're going to be paying off student loans for 20 or 30 years. And especially now that Betsy DeVos, the education secretary, is looking to bump up the time that it takes for you to, like, that you're on the hook to pay student loans before they can be forgiven. That's essentially saddling people with more debt. Even like myself, that went through school and then the economy changed, the landscape for my field totally changed, and the jobs that were around when I first got started and that motivated me to get started in my degree program weren't there by the time I graduated. There's a lot of people in that boat and are going to be paying off debt forever for loans that were taken out because of a payoff that never came.
If that's one of the whole student loan thing is a thing that's got me thinking a lot about the whole me going back to school thing here in the fall. But I'd like to do my very best to keep from having the student loans, and then also the possibility of jobs not being available when I get out. But I'm keeping the faith that there will be.
This is the end of part 1. Part 2 will be released on June 25th, 2017. Stay tuned, and thank you for listening. Potstirrer Podcast is on iTunes and Google Play. Subscribe, and if you enjoyed the show, please leave a review. Like Potstirrer Podcast on Facebook. Follow the show on Twitter at PotstirrerCast and Instagram at Potstirrer Podcast. I'm Jaye Pool. Let's fight for America's future, because freedom is not free.